Euro06. I am done with you and I do not want the babies. This is a divorce paper. Stand up and sign the papers for good. I'm full. What is this? Catherine's voice cracked, her hand trembling as she stared at the crisp white papers that had just landed on her hospital bed. The corner of one page grazed her knuckles, still swollen from the IV lines that had kept her alive through 36 hours of labor. Soerzoso 31, a termination of contract. Todd's voice cut through the sterile air like a blade. He stood at the foot of her bed in a charcoal Tom Ford suit, his Italian leather shoes gleaming under the fluorescent lights. Not a single hair out of place, not a single emotion on his face. The same face she'd kissed goodbye 12 hours ago when the contraction started. 0057. The same face that had whispered promises in the dark. But those eyes, those weren't the same eyes. Sign them, Catherine. I'm done. The words hung in the air, heavy and final. Behind him, through the slanted blinds, the New Mexico sun beat down mercilessly on the Roswell skyline. The heat made everything shimmer like a mirage. Oro 122. Like maybe this wasn't real. Like maybe she'd wake up from the anesthesia and none of this would be happening. But the 4 clear bassinets lined up beside her bed were real. The tiny fingers, the soft breathing, the miracles she just survived to bring into this world. Please, Todd, we can talk about this later. I just gave birth. 0146. Her entire body shook, not from the epidural wearing off, not from the exhaustion, from something primal, something breaking inside her chest that she didn't know could break. Don't. He stepped back like she'd tried to touch him with something diseased, his face twisted, not with anger, but with something worse. Disgust. Kyun Kutu is 09. Pure, unfiltered disgust. Don't come near me with this mess. Don't call. Don't text. And for God's sake, don't bring those babies anywhere near my businesses. Catherine's hand flew to her mouth, trying to catch the essay before it escaped. Tears splashed onto the divorce papers, bleeding the ink into dark pools. 0233. Through the blur, she could barely make out the words. Irreconcilable differences, immediate separation of assets, no claim to estate or holdings. He hadn't even looked at them, not once. 4 babies, his babies, and he couldn't even glance at their faces. But Todd, how will I? That's not my problem anymore. He straightened his cufflinks, checked his Rolex, turned toward the door like he was leaving a bad business meeting. 0305. The hospital bill is in your name. The locks change tonight. Shaw's moving in by Friday. Shaw. The name fell like a death sentence. Catherine had seen her at the casino. All sharp edges and sharper smiles, whispered conversations in Todd's ear at the high-stakes tables, manicured nails on his shoulder. You're replacing me with her? Todd paused at the door. 0333. For a split second, she thought she saw something human flicker across his face. Regret, maybe, hesitation. But then it was gone. I'm upgrading. Catherine Shaw understands the game. She's connected. Her family controls half the supply routes from El Paso to Albuquerque. You? He looked back at her, at the babies, at the whole pathetic scene. Ojo 359. You are a liability I can't afford anymore. The door clicked shut. The silence that followed was suffocating. Just Catherine, 4 newborns, and the steady beep of the heart monitor that somehow kept beating even though she was certain her heart had stopped. One of the babies started to cry, then another, then all 4. Their tiny voices building into a chorus of need that she had no idea how to meet. 0428. Catherine pressed her palms against her eyes, trying to stop the room from spinning. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Somewhere down the hall, someone was laughing. Life was just continuing like the world hadn't just ended. Her phone buzzed on the side table. A text from an unknown number. Locks changed. Your belongings are in trash bags on the curb. Idro 453. You have 2 hours before trash pickup. M. Marcus, Todd's head of security, the man who used to call her Mrs. Woodardid and open doors for her. Now he couldn't even use her name. Catherine picked up the papers with shaking hands. Her signature line waited at the bottom, mocking her. 23 pages of legal jargon that all said the same thing. You are nothing. Euro 521. You have nothing. You are alone. But as she stared at those 4 bassinets, something shifted. Something deep and primal and furious. She was a mother now, and mothers don't break. They burn. If you're still with me and this story is hitting different, drop a comment below with "I'm still here" and tell me where you're watching from. Euro 548. I need to know who's ready for Catherine's revenge. The nurse who came to check Catherine's vitals pretended not to notice the divorce papers. Professional courtesy, maybe. Or maybe she'd seen this before. Women discarded at their most vulnerable, left to pick up pieces they didn't break. You're doing great, honey, the nurse said, adjusting the IV drip. Her name tag read, Gloria, Guerzo 614. She had kind eyes, tired eyes. Vitals are stable. You'll be ready for discharge tomorrow morning. Tomorrow morning. 24 hours to figure out how to survive. Catherine nodded numbly, not trusting her voice. Gloria moved to check the babies, cooing softly at each one. These little angels are perfect. Strong heartbeats, good color. 0641. You did an amazing job, Mama. The words should have filled her with pride. Instead, they filled her with terror. 4 perfect babies, 4 mouths to feed, 4 lives depending on her, and $0 in her bank account because Todd controlled everything. After Gloria left, Catherine forced herself to sit up, ignoring the sharp pull of stitches and the wave of dizziness. 0711. She reached for the phone and dialed the only number she could think of. Catherine. Her sister Monique's voice crackled through the line, thick with sleep. Girl, it's 3 NAS in the morning. Did you have the babies? Are you? He left me. Silence. He left me, Monique. Right here in the hospital. Divorce papers. He's already changed the locks. Shaw's moving into my house. Yo 736. My house. The one I decorated. The one I... That son of a Monique's voice sharpened, fully awake now. Where are you? I'm coming right now. I'm getting in the car. No. Catherine's voice came out stronger than she felt. You're in Phoenix. That's 7 hours and you have the twins. I needed to hear your voice. Catherine, you can't stay there. R0800. Come to Phoenix. Bring the babies. We'll figure it out. With what car? He took everything, Mo. The accounts are frozen. The credit cards are cut off. I checked. I literally have nothing but the hospital gown I'm wearing. Another beat of silence. Then Monique's voice dropped to that dangerous calm that Catherine recognized from their childhood. Otro 825. What do you need right now? What do you need? Catherine looked at the 4 bassinets, at the tiny humans who had no idea their father had just abandoned them, at the divorce papers still wet with her tears. A plan, she whispered. I need a plan. Then we make one. First things first. A knock interrupted them. Sharp, authoritative, not the gentle tap of a nurse. 808-53. I have to go, Catherine said quickly. Catherine, don't sign anything else. Not until I... She hung up as the door opened. Marcus stood in the doorway. Todd's personal security chief, 6.4 of solid muscle and cold efficiency. He'd been at their wedding, had toasted to their happiness, had promised to protect the family. Apparently, that promise had an expiration date. Mrs. 0922. Woodard. He didn't quite meet her eyes. Mr. Steele asked me to deliver this. He held out a manila envelope. Catherine didn't take it. What is it? Inventory of personal effects removed from the residence, a list of items currently in storage, and a final communication from Mr. Steele's legal counsel. 0946. Storage trash bags on the curb as of 15 minutes ago. Trash pickup is 6:00 a.m. It's currently 3:17 a.m., less than 3 hours. 3 hours to figure out how to get from a hospital bed to across town to salvage what little she had left. I just gave birth, Catherine heard herself say. The words sounded strange, distant, like someone else was speaking. 10:13. I have 4 newborns. I can't even walk without help, and he's throwing my things in the trash. Marcus's jaw tightened. For just a second, something flickered in his expression, but then it was gone, replaced by the blank professionalism of a soldier following orders. I'm just the messenger, ma'am. He set the envelope on the visitor's chair. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. 10:41. He left before she could respond. Catherine stared at the envelope like it might bite. Inside it, she knew, would be another layer of humiliation, another way Todd had thought to twist the knife. But she made herself open it anyway, because survival meant knowing exactly how bad things were. The first page was an itemized list. 11:05. Removed from primary residence. Personal clothing, 27 trash bags. Toiletries and personal care items, 3 bags. Books and personal items, 9 bags. Photo albums and sentimental items, 2 bags. 41 trash bags. Her entire existence before this moment reduced to garbage bags on a curb. The second page was worse. 11:34. Items not included property of Todd Steele. All furniture purchased during marriage. All vehicles registered in joint names. All jewelry gifted during marriage. All electronics, wedding photos and albums, property of commissioning party. He'd thought of everything. Every single thing that might have value, he'd claimed. 12 Thakoenchaun. The last page was a single paragraph. Miss Woodard is hereby notified that she is no longer authorized to use the name Steele for any legal or business purposes. Any attempt to leverage association with Mr. Steele or Steele Enterprises will be met with immediate legal action. All hospital and medical bills related to the birth are the sole responsibility of Miss Woodard. Mr. 1226. Steele claims no financial responsibility for any children born during the dissolution process. Catherine read it 3 times, each word burning itself into her mind. No financial responsibility for any children. He'd actually put it in writing, in legal binding writing, that he wanted nothing to do with his own babies. Catwin 1252. One of the quadruplets, the smallest one, the one the doctors had worried about during delivery, started fussing, a tiny mooing cry that built into a wail. Then the others joined in, a cascading symphony of need. Catherine pushed herself up, every muscle screaming in protest. She shuffled to the first bassinet and carefully, so carefully, lifted the tiny body into her arms. 13:19. The baby immediately quieted, her dark eyes blinking up at Catherine with absolute trust in a mother who had no idea how to protect her. I'm sorry, Catherine whispered, tears streaming down her face. I'm sorry I chose him. I'm sorry I didn't see what he was. I'm sorry I brought you into this mess. The baby yawned, tiny fists stretching towards the ceiling, and something crystallized in Catherine's chest. 13:51. Something hard and bright and absolutely unbreakable. She looked down at her daughter, not Todd's, not anymore, and made a promise. But I'm going to fix it. I don't know how yet, but I'm going to burn his whole world down for what he did to us, and you're going to watch me do it. 14:15. The baby made a small, satisfied sound and fell back asleep. Catherine held her daughter close, breathing in that impossible newborn smell, and started planning. She had 2 hours and 43 minutes before the trash trucks came, and a whole lifetime to make Todd Steele regret the day he ever underestimated her. 7 years earlier, Catherine Woodard didn't know what a low-level enforcer was. 1444. She was 23, fresh out of nursing school, working the night shift at Roswell General Hospital's emergency room. She believed in saving lives, not taking them. She believed people were fundamentally good, just broken sometimes. She believed love could fix almost anything. She believed a lot of stupid things back then. Todd Steele came through the ER doors on a stretcher at 2:47 a.m. on a Tuesday in August. 1509. Gunshot wound to the shoulder, another graze across his ribs. He was conscious, cursing, and absolutely refusing to answer any questions about what happened. The cops in the waiting room were getting impatient, but the attending physician had priorities. Stop the bleeding first, ask questions later. Catherine was assigned to his case because she was the newest nurse, and nobody else wanted to deal with the obvious gang violence situation. 1530 Inks. She didn't care about the politics. She saw a 26-year-old man bleeding out on a gurney, his dark eyes flickering between consciousness and shock, and she went to work. "Stay with me," she said firmly, cutting away his blood-soaked shirt. "You're going to be fine, but I need you to stay awake. Can you do that?" Todd's eyes focused on her face. 1558. Even through the pain, even half delirious, he looked at her like she was something precious, something clean in a dirty world. "What's your name?" he managed through gritted teeth. "Catherine, and I'm trying to save your life, so maybe save the small talk for later." He actually laughed, then immediately regretted it as the movement pulled his stitches. "I like you." 1621. "You don't look scared." "I'm terrified," Catherine admitted, applying pressure to slow the bleeding while the doctor prepped the surgical suite. "But I'm going to be brave instead. Now shut up and let me work." Something shifted in his expression then, like he'd found something he didn't know he was looking for. The surgery took 4 hours. 1642. Catherine stayed the entire time assisting, monitoring vitals, making sure Todd Steele didn't die on her watch. When they finally wheeled him to recovery, the cops were gone. Probably paid off or threatened off. She'd learned later. It was just Catherine checking his bandages, adjusting his IV, making sure he was comfortable. 1703. "Why are you still here?" Todd asked groggily. "Your shift ended 2 hours ago." Catherine looked up, surprised he'd noticed. "Someone needs to monitor you. Make sure there's no complications." "Bullshit. There's 3 other nurses on duty." His eyes clearer now pinned her in place. "Why are you really here?" She didn't have a good answer. 1726. Something about him pulled at her. The way he'd looked at her. Maybe like she mattered. Like she was more than just another healthcare worker in scrubs in a hospital full of people who barely noticed she existed. Todd Steele had seen her. "I don't know," she said honestly. "Then stay until you figure it out." So she did. 1747. She came back the next night and the night after that. Todd was supposed to be discharged after 72 hours, but somehow his paperwork kept getting delayed. Catherine brought him real food from the cafeteria, not the sad hospital trays, and they talked about everything, about nothing, about the desert and the stars and what it meant to want more than what you were given. 1811. She never told her exactly what he did. Not at first. Just that he worked security for some local businesses. That sometimes the work got rough. That he was trying to move up, make something of himself, build something that mattered. Catherine, young and naive and so desperately lonely, heard what she wanted to hear. She saw potential. 1832. She saw someone who could be saved. When Todd finally left the hospital, he left his number on her locker with a note. "Dinner. I promise I won't get shot this time." She should have run. Should have recognized the red flags. Should have known that men who get shot at 2 a.m. and refuse to talk to police aren't the kind of men you build a life with. 1854. But she didn't run. She called him, and when he picked her up in a beat-up Chevy that smelled like cigarettes and violence, she got in anyway. Their first date was at a diner on the edge of town. Todd was different outside the hospital. Sharper, more guarded, constantly scanning the room like he expected trouble. But with Catherine, he softened. 1915. He asked about her family, her dreams, why she became a nurse. "I like fixing things," she said simply, "making broken things whole again." Todd's smile was sad. "Some things were too broken to fix. I don't believe that." "You should." But she didn't. Not then. Not when he kissed her goodnight with a gentleness that contradicted everything else about him. 1944. Not when he started showing up at the hospital with coffee during her breaks. Not when he told her 3 months in that she was the only good thing in his life. "I'm not good," Todd said one night, holding her close in his apartment. "I've done things, Catherine. Bad things. Things you don't want to know about." "Then be better," she whispered. 2009. "You can be better. I'll help you." That was her first mistake, thinking she could fix him, thinking love was enough. Todd's security work turned out to be enforcement for the Castillo Syndicate, one of the oldest crime families in New Mexico. He collected debts, delivered messages, occasionally made problems disappear. 2037. It was ugly work, but it paid well, and Todd was good at it. Too good. Within a year, he'd moved up the ranks. Within 2 years, he was running entire operations, and Catherine was right there beside him, patching his wounds when deals went bad, holding him when the nightmares came, believing that underneath the violence was a man who could still be saved. 2102. They got married on a Tuesday afternoon at the courthouse. No family. Catherine's parents had stopped speaking to her when they found out who Todd was. No friends. Todd didn't have friends, just associates. Just them. The justice of the peace, and a promise that they'd make it work somehow. 2124. "I'm going to give you everything," Todd promised, sliding a simple gold band on her finger. "A real house, security, a life where you never have to worry about anything." And he did for a while. Todd's rise through the syndicate was meteoric. His combination of intelligence and ruthlessness made him untouchable. By their third anniversary, he wasn't just an enforcer. 2150. He was the enforcer, the man people whispered about, the man even other criminals feared. Catherine told herself it was fine, that she could live with the moral compromises as long as Todd kept his work separate from their home, as long as he came back to her every night, as long as he still looked at her the way he had in that hospital room, like she was something precious. 2218. But power changes people. Catherine learned that lesson slowly, painfully, watching the man she loved harden into something unrecognizable. The first time Catherine met Shaw, Catherine was 5 months pregnant with the Quadruplets. It was at the casino, the crown jewel, Todd's newest acquisition. He'd invited Catherine to the grand opening, one of the rare times he wanted her in his professional world. 2249. She dressed carefully, a flowing black dress that accommodated her growing belly, her hair pulled back elegantly. She wanted him to be proud. Shaw was at the high-stakes poker table, laughing at something one of the dealers said. She wore red, blood red, and every eye in the room tracked her movement. Sharp features, sharper smile, the kind of dangerous beauty that came with warning labels. 2320. "Who's that?" Catherine asked, suddenly feeling very pregnant and very plain. Todd's expression was neutral. "Shaw Delgado. She's with the El Paso operation. Her family controls half the supply routes into New Mexico. She's important. She's connected." Todd's hand found Catherine's back. "Come on, I want you to meet the investors." 23:45. But Catherine caught the way Shaw watched them, the calculation in her eyes, the slight smile when she saw Catherine's belly. The second time Catherine met Shaw was at a syndicate dinner 2 months later. Catherine was 7 months pregnant now, swollen and uncomfortable, but Todd insisted she come. "You're my wife," he said. 24:11. "People need to see that I have a family, that I'm stable." So, Catherine went, even though every instinct screamed at her to stay home. Shaw was there again, seated strategically close to Todd at the main table. All night, Catherine watched them talk. Shaw leaning in close, whispering in Todd's ear, making him laugh in ways Catherine hadn't heard in months. 24:37. Business talk, she told herself, just networking. But there was something else there. Something predatory in the way Shaw touched Todd's arm. Something calculating in how she'd glance at Catherine, then back to Todd, like she was measuring the distance between them. "Your wife looks tired," Shaw said sweetly when Catherine excused herself early. 25:03. "Pregnancy must be so exhausting." "It is," Catherine said, forcing a smile. "But worth it." Shaw's smile widened. "4 babies, right? That's ambitious." The word hung in the air like an insult. Todd drove them home in silence. Catherine tried to bring up Shaw the way she'd been touching him, the looks. But Todd shut it down. 25:30. "She's business, Catherine. Important business. Don't start drama where there isn't any. I'm not starting anything. I'm just saying, drop it." So, she did because she was 7 months pregnant and exhausted. And maybe he was right. Maybe she was being paranoid. Maybe pregnancy hormones were making her see threats that didn't exist. That was her second mistake. 25:55. The third time Catherine saw Shaw was the day after she came home from the hospital with the quadruplets. She'd been discharged with nowhere to go, had managed to retrieve most of her trash bags before the trucks came, and was temporarily crashing with a former coworker while she figured out her next move. 26:18. She'd gone to the house, her house, to try one more time to talk to Todd, to beg if she had to. 4 babies needed a father, needed stability, needed something more than trash bags and charity. But when she pulled up to the gates in her borrowed car, Shaw was already there. Not visiting, moving in. A moving truck was in the driveway. 26:42. Shaw stood on the front steps in designer loungewear, directing men where to put her furniture, her art, her life, sliding seamlessly into the space Catherine had occupied. Shaw saw her, made deliberate eye contact, smiled, then walked inside Catherine's house and closed the door. Catherine sat in that borrowed car for 20 minutes. 27:09. One of the babies in the back seat, crying in the back seat, tears streaming down her face, finally understanding. This wasn't sudden. This wasn't Todd making a rash decision in the hospital. This had been planned, calculated. Shaw had been circling for months, whispering poison about liability and weakness and better options, and Todd, drunk on power and Shaw's promises of bigger connections and better opportunities, had listened. 27:44. Catherine had been replaced before she even knew she was in competition. She drove away slowly, watching her old life disappear in the rear view. The house where she'd hung every picture frame, the garden she'd planted, the nursery she'd painted in soft yellows and greens, dreaming of the family they'd build together. 28:08. All of it given to Shaw. All of it like Catherine had never existed. That night, feeding 4 babies in a cramped motel room, Catherine made herself a promise. She was done being the woman who believed love could fix everything, done being the naive nurse who saw potential in monsters. She'd been Catherine Woodard when she met Todd, then Catherine Steele, though she'd never really been allowed to use that name. 28:39. Now she was just Catherine again. Single mother, abandoned wife, 41 trash bags, and 4 babies. But she was alive, and alive meant dangerous. She just had to figure out how. The motel on Route 285 was called the Desert Star Inn, which was optimistic considering there were no stars visible through the haze of neon and dust. 2908. And it definitely wasn't an inn. It was a roach motel in the most literal sense. Catherine had killed 3 cockroaches in the first hour, but it was $75 a week. And the manager didn't ask questions when Catherine showed up with 4 newborns and no husband, so it would have to do. Room 14 smelled like cigarette smoke and defeat. 2 double beds with questionable stains, a bathroom the size of a closet, and a kitchenette consisting of a mini fridge, a hot plate, and a microwave that only worked if you held the door closed with your knee. The AC unit, 2946, rattled like it was actively dying. The carpet was orange, not by design, but by decades of neglect. Catherine stood in the doorway, babies in car seats at her feet, and tried not to cry. She'd left the hospital that morning with Gloria's phone number, a bag of sample formula the nurses had quietly gathered for her, and a pamphlet about local resources for single mothers. 3014. The social worker had been kind, but firm. Catherine needed to establish independent housing within 72 hours, or Child Protective Services would get involved. So, here she was. Independent housing. "This is temporary," she told her sleeping babies as she carried them inside one by one. "I promise this is just until I figure things out." 3039. But figuring things out required money, and money required a job, and jobs required childcare, and childcare required more money than any job would pay. It was a trap with no exit, and Catherine could feel the walls closing in. She was setting up the last makeshift crib, a dresser drawer lined with towels because she couldn't afford actual cribs when her phone rang. 3104. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer. Catherine Woodard, a man's voice, professional, cold. "Who's asking?" "Daniel Pierce. I represent Todd Steele's interests. I'm calling to arrange final asset distribution." Catherine's stomach dropped. "I thought that was already handled. He took everything." "Not quite. There's the matter of the marital home." 3130. "You're still on the deed as co-owner." Hope flared, dangerous and desperate. "So I have rights to the house." "Had rights." Past tense. "Mr. Steele is offering a settlement. Sign over your portion of the deed and he'll agree not to pursue you for half of the debt incurred during the marriage." "What debt?" "I didn't." 3154. "The mortgage, property taxes, utilities, improvements, approximately $273,000. Your signature incurs equal liability." The room tilted. "I never signed off on any of that." "You signed the marriage certificate. In New Mexico, that's community property." Daniel's voice was bored, like he'd had this conversation 1,000 times. "Mr. 3217, Steele is being generous. He could pursue collection. Instead, he's offering a clean break. Sign the deed, walk away. No debt. And if I don't, then he files for half-debt collection and you'll be paying him for the next 30 years. Your choice, Miss Woodard, but choose quickly. This offer expires in 48 hours. 3239. He hung up before she could respond. Catherine stared at her phone, rage and helplessness roaring in her chest. Todd was going to take even the theoretical possibility of the house, even the ghost of her claim to something. He was going to take it all and make her thank him for it. She was saved from spiraling by a knock at the door. Catherine froze. 3304. Nobody knew she was here except Gloria from the hospital, and Gloria wouldn't have time to visit during her shift. She crept to the door, looked through the peephole. Marcus. Todd's security chief stood outside, dressed down in jeans and a t-shirt instead of his usual suit. He looked uncomfortable, shifting his weight, glancing around like he didn't want to be seen. 3329. Catherine opened the door. Crack. What do you want to talk? 5 minutes, please. Every instinct screamed not to trust him, but curiosity won. She opened the door wider, blocking his view of the babies. Talk. Marcus's eyes flicked past her, taking in the dismal room. Something crossed his face. Guilt, maybe. Or pity. 3354. Catherine wasn't sure which was worse. This isn't right, he said quietly. What he did. How he did it, it's not right. Little late for a conscience, Marcus. I know. He pulled an envelope from his pocket. Not official looking like the others, just a plain white envelope. I can't fix it, but I can give you this. Catherine took it wearily. Inside was cash. A lot of cash. 3420. She counted quickly. $5,000. What is this? Severance. Technically. Marcus wouldn't meet her eyes. You worked for the household, managed things. This is what you're owed. I was his wife, not his employee. The IRS sees it differently. You were on payroll, listed as household manager. Todd used it for tax purposes. 3447. Marcus finally looked at her. Take it. It's legal. It's yours. And it's enough to get out of this place and into something better. Catherine wanted to throw it back in his face, wanted to tell him to take his guilt money and shove it. But $5,000 was formula for months, was a security deposit on a real apartment, was breathing room she desperately needed. 3514. Why are you doing this? She asked. Because I have daughters. Marcus's voice was rough. And if anyone treated them the way Todd's treating you, I'd want someone to help. He left before she could say anything else. Catherine closed the door and leaned against it, clutching the envelope. $5,000, a lifeline thrown from a sinking ship. 3542. It wasn't enough to fix anything, but it was enough to survive a little longer. She was putting the money in the broken safe when someone pounded on the door. Harder this time, more aggressive. Catherine Woodard, open up. Not Marcus's voice. Younger, meaner. Catherine looked through the peephole. 3605. Two men in expensive suits. She recognized them from Todd's security detail. The younger one, Carlo, had always given her the creeps. Too much enjoyment in the violence. I know you're in there, Carlo called. We saw Marcus leave. Wondered what he was up to. Catherine didn't open the door. What do you want? Just delivering a message from the king. 3631. Carlo's smile was visible even through the peephole. He heard you're still in town. Thinks maybe you didn't understand the terms of your divorce clearly. I understood perfectly. Did you? Because you're still using the name Steele. Still telling people you're his wife. That's a problem. Catherine, I'm not. 3654. You were at the hospital under Catherine Steele. You checked into this hole under Catherine Steele. Carlos' voice hardened. The king doesn't want any confusion. You're not a Steele anymore. You're not anything anymore. So stop trying to leverage his name. I'm not trying to leverage anything. The king doesn't pay for leftovers. The words hit like a slap. 3723. Catherine's hand tightened on the door knob. Carlo continued, enjoying himself. Now, you got 48 hours to sign those deed papers. After that, he starts collection proceedings, and trust me, you don't want to see how the king collects debts from people who disappoint him. They left, their laughter echoing down the motel corridor. 3747. Catherine slid down the door until she was sitting on the filthy carpet, shaking, not from fear, from rage. Pure, incandescent rage. The king doesn't pay for leftovers. She looked at her 4 babies, sleeping peacefully in their makeshift beds. They had no idea their father saw them as garbage, as something to be discarded and forgotten. 3814. But Catherine knew, and Catherine was done being discarded. She pulled out the divorce papers she'd been avoiding. The deed transfer Daniel Pierce wanted signed, and she read every single word with new eyes, looking for loopholes, looking for leverage, looking for anything. She found it on page 17, a clause about asset disclosure. 3838. Todd had listed the house, the cars, the businesses, but there was a line item she didn't recognize. Barren Lands Trust, established 2018, beneficiary, listed as Catherine R. Woodard. Catherine stared at those words. She'd never heard of any trust, never signed anything establishing one, but there it was in Todd's own asset disclosure. 3903. Something with her name on it, something he'd forgotten to steal. She grabbed her laptop, one of the few things that had survived the trash bag purge, and started searching. Barren Lands Trust, property records, New Mexico land ownership databases. It took 3 hours, but she found it. 15,000 acres of desert land outside Roswell, deeded to a trust in her name in 2018, right after their wedding. 3936. The grantor was Miguel Castillo. Catherine's hands froze on the keyboard. Miguel Castillo, the old head of the syndicate, the man Todd had eventually pushed out to take his place as king. Miguel, who had died 6 months ago. Miguel, who had apparently left her a piece of worthless desert. Catherine pulled up property records, satellite imagery, geological surveys. 4003. The land was exactly what it looked like. Barren, remote, supposedly useless. No buildings, no infrastructure, no obvious value. But Miguel Castillo didn't do anything without a reason, and Todd forgot to mention it in the divorce papers. Catherine stared at the screen until the baby started crying for their 4 a.m., 4026, feeding. She made bottles, fed them one by one, and made plans. 48 hours until she had to sign the deed transfer. 48 hours to figure out why a dying crime boss had left her a piece of dessert. 48 hours to find her weapon. The Desert Star Inn's fluorescent lights flickered as the sun rose over the New Mexico wasteland. 4054. Catherine sat on the motel bed, surrounded by her sleeping children and her stolen trash bags, and the envelope of guilt money. And for the first time since Todd had handed her those divorce papers, she smiled. 3 months later, Catherine's alarm went off at 4:30 a.m. She silenced it quickly before it could wake the babies, though it hardly mattered. 4117. They'd all been awake at 2:30 anyway, screaming in rotation like they'd coordinated the assault. She'd gotten 90 minutes of sleep total, and that was being generous. Her body moved on autopilot now. Feed the babies, change the babies, get them dressed in whatever mismatched outfits she'd managed to thrift, pack the diaper bag with surgical precision. 4141. Bottles, diapers, wipes, backup clothes, backup clothes, because babies were tiny destruction machines. By 5:45, she was loading them into car seats in the back of her '04 Honda Civic, the only car Marcus's guilt money had been able to afford. By 6:00, she was pulling into Rosa's apartment complex, 4205. Rosa Mendiz was 67, lived on disability, and ran an unlicensed daycare out of her living room for mothers who couldn't afford the official places. 25 a day for all 4 babies. It should have been more. Catherine knew she was being charged charity rates, but Rosa just smiled and said, "I remember being young and desperate. Pay it forward someday." 4229. "Morning, mija," Rosa said, opening her door before Catherine could even knock. Her tiny apartment already smelled of coffee and baby formula. 3 other kids were already there, playing with ancient Fisher-Price toys on a worn blanket. How'd they sleep? Like demons. So, normally, Rosa took the first baby with practiced ease. Go. 4253. You're going to be late for the morning shift. Catherine was already late for the morning shift. She made it to Martinez Diner by 6:47. She was supposed to clock in at 6:30. Her manager, Tony, shot her a look, but didn't say anything. He knew her situation. Half the town knew her situation by now. The great scandal of the Mafia king's abandoned wife. 43:17. Table 6 needs coffee, Tony said instead of, hello, and the breakfast rush is going to be hell today. Some big construction project breaking ground, 50 workers coming in hungry. Catherine grabbed her apron and got to work. The morning shift at Martinez Diner was 6:30 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. 8 hours of coffee refills, scrambled eggs, and men who thought a $2 tip was generous. 43:45. Her feet ached within the first hour. By hour 3, her back was screaming. By hour 6, she was running on pure spite. Her lunch break was 15 minutes. She spent it in her car pumping breast milk in the parking lot because formula was expensive and her body was at least free. She'd gotten used to the indignity of it. The weird angle, the pain, the knowledge that she was literally commodifying her own body to save money. 44:14. When she clocked out at 2:30, she'd made $73 in wages plus 42 in tips. She had exactly 45 minutes to pick up the kids from Rose's, get them home, feed them, and make it to her second job. The evening shift at Lai's bar started at 4:00 p.m. Catherine had never worked in a bar before, had never even spent much time in bars. 44:38. Todd hadn't liked her going out without him. But Lai's was hiring, and they didn't ask too many questions about why a respectable-looking mother of 4 needed to sling drinks at night. She'd worked out a system with Rosa. The older woman would stay late until 9 p.m. for an extra $20. Catherine would work the dinner rush, make tips from men, drinking away their problems, and race back to put her babies to bed. 45:04. The system was unsustainable. Catherine knew this. She was surviving on 3 hours of sleep. Her milk was starting to dry up from stress, and she'd lost so much weight her uniforms hung loose. But it was the only way to make rent and formula and diapers and the 1,000 other expenses that came with 4 babies. 45:26. Tonight, Lai's was busy. Some kind of celebration. Catherine didn't ask. She just poured drinks and kept moving and collected tips with a smile she didn't feel. At 7:30, the TV behind the bar cut to the local news. Catherine was wiping down glasses when the anchor's cheerful voice cut through the bar noise. And in Roswell Society news, businessman Todd Steele hosted a charity gala at the Crown Jewel Casino tonight, raising over $200,000 for local youth programs. 45:59. Catherine's hands froze. The screen showed Todd in a tuxedo looking every inch the respectable businessman. Shaw was on his arm in a dress that probably cost more than Catherine made in a month. They were smiling, toasting champagne, surrounded by Roswell's elite. The camera panned across the casino ballroom. 46:24. Crystal chandeliers, ice sculptures, a string quartet, women in gowns, and men in designer suits. All celebrating how generous Todd Steele was, how committed to the community, how absolutely not a man who'd abandoned his wife and 4 children 3 months ago. You okay, honey? Catherine looked up. Agnes, one of the regular customers, was watching her with concern. 46:51. Catherine realized her hands were shaking. I'm fine. You don't look fine. You look like you've seen a ghost. Worse, I've seen my ex-husband. Agnes followed her gaze to the TV. Understanding dawned. Oh, sweetie, that's him. The one who? Yeah. Agnes's expression hardened. Want me to throw something at the screen? I'm 83. 47:16. What are they going to do? Arrest me? Catherine laughed despite herself. I appreciate the offer, but I need this job. The news segment continued. Todd was being interviewed now, talking about giving back to the community, about building a better Roswell, about family values. Behind him, Shaw smiled like she'd won the lottery. Mr. 4741. Steele, you've been a pillar of Roswell business for years. What's next for you? Expansion, Todd said smoothly. We're breaking ground on 2 new properties next month, the Crown Jewel Resort and the Oasis Casino, bringing jobs, tourism, prosperity to our beautiful city. The camera showed architectural renderings, massive buildings, pools, golf courses, all of it apparently funded by Todd's successful business ventures. 4811. Catherine knew where that money really came from. The drug routes, the protection rackets, the violence wrapped in expensive suits. But on TV, Todd was a hero. Bastard, someone muttered. Catherine looked over. One of the construction workers from the morning diner rush was sitting at the bar, staring at the TV with undisguised hatred. 4834. You know him? Catherine asked. Unfortunately, worked one of his sites last year. He shorted everyone's pay, then had his thugs threaten us when we complained. The man took a long pull of his beer, but he's connected, so nothing happens. Just how it works. Catherine felt something click into place. Which site? The Crown Jewel expansion. 4858. The one he's so proud of on TV. The man laughed bitterly. Built on broken promises and stolen wages, but sure family values. Catherine served the rest of her shift on autopilot, her mind racing. When she finally clocked out at 9 a.m., she'd made $93 in tips. Good night. Great night, actually. 4923. She picked up the babies from Rosa. They were all sleeping. Rosa had a magic touch Catherine envied. She loaded them carefully into the car, drove home to their tiny apartment, and carried them inside one by one. By the time she'd put them all down, it was 10:30. She should sleep. She should absolutely sleep, because her alarm would go off in 6 hours and this whole exhausting cycle would start again. 4950. Instead, she opened her laptop, the Barren Lands Trust. She'd been researching it for 3 months now, whenever she had spare minutes. The land itself was a mystery. 15,000 acres of nothing, apparently. But the trust documents had led her to other things. Property records, water rights, mineral surveys. 5013. And tonight, buzzing with anger from seeing Todd on TV, she finally found what she was looking for. Buried in a 1987 geological survey marked as inconclusive and never followed up on. Significant underground aquifer beneath the Barren Lands property. Estimated capacity enough to supply Roswell's growing population for 50 years. Water rights in New Mexico were complicated, but the principle was simple. 5041. Whoever owned the land controlled what was underneath it. Catherine pulled up current water usage data for Roswell, cross-referenced it with commercial properties, highlighted in yellow every single one of Todd's businesses. The Crown Jewel Casino, the Oasis development, the new resort, all of them pulling water from the municipal supply. 5104. All of them dependent on the aquifer beneath land that was currently sitting empty under Catherine's name. She stared at the screen, pieces falling into place. Miguel Castillo hadn't left her worthless dessert. He'd left her leverage. The old crime boss, dying, had given his enforcer's naive wife the one thing that could destroy his empire, and Todd had been too busy celebrating his new life with Shaw to notice. 5135. Catherine looked at her sleeping babies, thought about the $73 from the diner and the $93 from the bar, thought about Todd on TV talking about family values while his actual family survived on tips and charity. Thought about Shaw in that expensive dress, living in Catherine's house, sleeping in Catherine's bed. Thought about 3 months of humiliation and exhaustion and counting pennies to buy formula while Todd threw galas. 5207. She pulled up the contact info for a water rights lawyer she'd found weeks ago. Too expensive to hire then, but now she had a reason. She drafted an email. Mr. Rodriguez, I'm the owner of the Barren Lands Trust property. I'd like to discuss water rights enforcement. How quickly can we file to restrict unauthorized usage? Kay Woodard. She hit send before she could second guess herself. 5234. Then she closed her laptop, set her alarm, and lay down in bed. Sleep wouldn't come. It never really did anymore. But she closed her eyes anyway. And for the first time in 3 months, she smiled. Todd's gala had raised $200,000 tonight. Catherine was about to cost him everything. If you're still watching this and you can't wait to see Todd's world burn, drop a "I'm still here" in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. 5306. Catherine's revenge is just getting started, and you won't want to miss what happens next. The lawyer's office smelled like old paper and expensive wood polish. Catherine sat in the waiting room, bouncing her knee nervously, trying not to calculate how much this consultation was going to cost. 5328. Rodriguez and Associates had a reputation, the kind of reputation that came with hourly rates Catherine couldn't afford, and a client list that included politicians and oil companies. But they'd also agreed to meet with her. That had to mean something. Miss Woodard. A paralegal appeared in the doorway. Mr. Rodriguez will see you now. Catherine followed her down a hallway lined with plaques and diplomas. 5355. The office at the end was corner view, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking downtown Roswell. Behind an enormous mahogany desk sat Javier Rodriguez, mid-50s, sharp suit, sharper eyes. Miss Woodard, please sit. He gestured to a leather chair. I've reviewed the documents you sent. The Barren Lands Trust. Quite an interesting property. 5422. I don't have a lot of money for a retainer, Catherine said immediately. I'm working 2 jobs. 4 kids. I can probably scrape together $1,000, maybe $1,500 if I Rodriguez held up a hand. Let me stop you there. I'm not interested in your money. Catherine blinked. I don't understand. 5445. Miguel Castillo was a friend of mine. Not in the traditional sense, perhaps, but we had an understanding. Rodriguez leaned back in his chair. Before he died, he asked me to keep an eye on that trust, to wait for you to find it, to help you when you did. Why? Because Miguel believed in evening scales. Todd Steele worked for him for years, then betrayed him, pushed him out of his own organization. 5513. Miguel couldn't touch him. Too many political complications, but he could leave you the tools to do it yourself. Rodriguez's smile was thin. Consider me Miguel's final gift. Legal counsel, no charge. Catherine felt tears prick her eyes. She blinked them back. What can we do? Rodriguez opened a file. Let's talk about water rights. 5539. Under New Mexico law, whoever owns the land owns the water beneath it. That includes aquifers, underground reserves, everything. You inherited 15,000 acres that sit on top of the primary aquifer feeding Roswell's commercial district. I saw that in the geological surveys. But how does that help me? The water's already being used. 5603. Ah, but that's the key. It's being used without proper authorization. When the original surveys were conducted in 1987 and marked inconclusive, no water rights were ever properly established. The city assumed the aquifer was municipal property. They've been pulling from it for decades without anyone questioning it. Catherine leaned forward. 5627. But it's not municipal property. Exactly, it's trust property. Your property, which means every gallon pulled without your authorization is technically theft. Rodriguez pulled out a map marked with red circles. I've identified 43 commercial properties currently drawing from your aquifer without rights. Want to guess who owns most of them? Catherine didn't need to guess. Todd, 5656. The Crown Jewel Casino, the Oasis development, 3 hotels, 2 nightclubs, and the new resort he's breaking ground on next month. Rodriguez tapped each location, all of them dependent on water they have no legal right to use. Can we shut them down? We can do better than that. We can make him pay for every gallon he's used for the past 7 years. Rodriguez's smile widened. 5722. At commercial water rates adjusted for unauthorized usage penalties, We're looking at approximately $8 million in back charges. The number hit Catherine like a physical blow. 8 million, give or take. And that's before we start discussing future usage rights. If Todd wants to keep those businesses running, he'll need to negotiate a contract with you at rates you set. 5749. Catherine's mind was spinning. $8 million and enough to destroy him, enough to take everything he'd taken from her and more. How long? Catherine asked. How long before we can file? I can have the paperwork ready by end of week. But Miss Woodard, I need to be clear about something. Rodriguez's expression turned serious. 5814. The moment we file these claims, Todd Steele will know you're behind it. He won't take this well. These are people who solve problems violently. I know what he is. Do you? Because knowing and experiencing are very different things. Miguel was killed in his sleep. Officially, a heart attack. Unofficially. Rodriguez let the implication hang. 5838. Todd has resources, connections. Once he knows you're threatening his business, he'll come after you hard. Catherine thought about the hospital room, the divorce papers, the trash bags on the curb, the 3 months of exhaustion and humiliation while Todd played hero on TV. Let him come, she said quietly. I've got 4 babies who need to know their mother doesn't back down from bullies. 5904. Rodriguez studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded. All right, then let's destroy him. The paperwork was filed on a Wednesday morning. By Wednesday afternoon, Catherine's phone was ringing. Unknown number. She let it go to voicemail. Then it rang again and again and again. Finally, she answered. Hello, Catherine Woodard. 5931. A woman's voice. Professional, cold. This is Helen Shaw. I think we need to talk. Catherine's blood froze. Shaw. Todd's girlfriend. The woman who'd stolen her life. I don't have anything to say to you. Then just listen. I don't know what game you think you're playing with these water rights claims, but it ends now. Drop the case. 5957. Sign whatever paperwork my lawyers send you and we can all move on with our lives. Move on. You moved into my house. You're sleeping with my children's father and now you're calling me about your lawyers. Shaw's voice hardened. Your house? You mean house you were graciously allowed to live in until you couldn't fulfill your obligations. 1 cross 20. Don't get confused about who you are, Catherine. You're nobody. A footnote. The warm body before the real partnership. Partnership? Catherine laughed, bitter. Is that what you call it? Being Todd's latest accessory. I call it being essential. Todd needed someone who understood the business, someone who could expand his operations, not drag them down with sentiment and weakness. We won Con 45. Shaw's voice dripped condescension. You played house, and expected that to be enough. I built an empire. You built it on stolen water. Silence. Then you don't know what you're talking about. I know exactly what I'm talking about. Every drop running through Todd's casinos, his hotels, his precious new resort. It's all coming from my land, my aquifer, my property. Cut 101 15. Catherine felt power surge through her. And you've been stealing it for years. Those claims will never hold up in court. We have permits, authorizations from the city, not from me. The city doesn't own that water. I do. Catherine's voice stayed steady. So, here's how this works. You tell Todd he can either negotiate a contract with me at my rates on my terms, or I shut off the water and watch his empire dry up, literally. 1101 46. You vindictive little careful. I'm recording this call. Threats don't look good in court. Catherine wasn't actually recording anything, but Shaw didn't need to know that. More silence. Then Shaw's voice came back colder. Todd was right to leave you. You're exactly the kind of desperate, grasping nobody who can't let go. 10210. This pathetic attempt at revenge is just proof you never understood what you had. I understood perfectly. I had a man who pretended to love me until he didn't need me anymore. A man who threw me and his children away like garbage. And now I have the one thing he needs to survive. Catherine smiled. How does it feel? Shaw, knowing you built your whole future on sand, or I guess on water that isn't yours. Shaw hung up. Hana 1-00239. Catherine's hands were shaking, but from adrenaline now, not fear. She'd faced down the woman who'd stolen her life, and won. 20 minutes later, her phone rang again. This time, she recognized the number. Rodriguez. Well, the lawyer said. That was fast. Todd Steele's lawyers just called. They want to meet tomorrow. Their office. 10304. That was Shaw on the phone just now. She threatened me. Of course she did. And now Todd knows you're not bluffing. Rodriguez sounded almost amused. The question is, what do you want? What's your goal here? Catherine thought about her babies asleep in their cribs, about Rosa who watched them for charity rates, about Agnes at the bar offering to throw things at the TV, about Marcus and his guilt money, about every person who'd seen her ground into dust and offered a hand up. Yan 1-03-35. And she thought about Todd in his tuxedo talking about family values on TV. I want him to lose everything. Everything he took from me. Everything he built on my back. Everything he thinks makes him untouchable. I want him to know what it feels like to be thrown away. That's not just revenge. That's annihilation. Good. Few 10401. Can you make it happen? Rodriguez was quiet for a moment. Then yes. But it'll take strategy. We can't just shut off the water. That'll hurt innocent workers, cause lawsuits, make you look like the villain. We need to be surgical, calculated, make him destroy himself. Tell me how. Come to my office tomorrow morning. Bring coffee. This is going to take a while. 10425. Catherine hung up and stood at her apartment window, looking out at the Roswell skyline. Somewhere out there, Todd was panicking. Shaw was strategizing. Their whole world was starting to crack. And Catherine, the abandoned wife working 2 jobs to survive, was holding the sledgehammer. Tomorrow, they'd build the plan. Tonight, she'd celebrate by finally sleeping more than 3 hours. 1:04:52. The water didn't stop all at once. That would have been too obvious, too easily blamed on a single source. Instead, Rodriguez helps Catherine orchestrate something far more elegant. A slow, methodical squeeze that looked like natural infrastructure problems. It started with the Crown Jewel Casino. Bar 10516. Week 1. Water pressure dropped during peak hours. Nothing catastrophic, just enough that the fountains looked anemic. The pools ran slower. Guests complained about weak showers. Todd's maintenance team checked the pipes. Found nothing wrong. Blamed the city. Week 2. The Oasis development site couldn't get enough water for concrete mixing, construction delays, contractors complaining. Connor 10544. Todd had to pay overtime and expedite shipping, eating into his already stretched budget. Week 3. 3 of Todd's hotels started getting brownish water in the morning. Not dangerous, just unappealing. Guest complaints skyrocketed. Online reviews tanked. Todd had to comp rooms and upgrade filtration systems. All of it explainable. Hodgwan 0609. All of it deniable. All of it slowly bleeding his resources. Catherine watched from her apartment, monitoring news and social media, working her 2 jobs like nothing had changed. But everything had changed. She'd stopped being a victim and become a chess player, and Todd was too arrogant to realize he was already in check. 106.35. The Crown Jewel lost 17% revenue last month, Rodriguez reported over the phone. Guest satisfaction is down. 3 major conventions canceled, and the new resort's breaking ground has been delayed twice now because they can't get reliable water delivery for construction. How long before he figures it out? Catherine asked. He already knows something's wrong. R10657. He just doesn't know it's you yet. Rodriguez sounded pleased. His lawyers keep calling the city. The city keeps insisting their infrastructure is fine. Nobody's connecting it to the water rights claim because we filed that separately through different channels. He thinks you're trying to shake him down for money. 10717. He doesn't realize you're the source of his problems. Catherine smiled. Keep it that way. But keeping secrets in Roswell was harder than she'd thought. She was at Martinez Diner pouring coffee for the morning rush when she overheard two of Todd's contractors talking. Checked every pipe, every valve, every connection. There's nothing physically wrong with the system. Button 10742. The water pressure just drops randomly and nobody can figure out why. Probably the aquifer. I heard the geological surveys from the 80s were never properly followed up. Could be shifts in the underground reservoir. Well, Steele's going to have to pay someone to figure it out. We're 3 weeks behind schedule and every day costs him a fortune. Get 10804. Catherine refilled their coffee and moved on, keeping her expression neutral. But inside, she was burning with satisfaction. That night at Lai's bar, she overheard even more. Shaw's freaking out. She leveraged her family's money into that resort development, and if it doesn't open on time, they're going to pull funding. Hunter 10825. She's been screaming at anyone who gets near her, heard she blames Steele, says he's mismanaging everything. Well, something's wrong. His whole operation is falling apart. Catherine wiped down the bar, fighting to keep the smile off her face, but the squeeze had consequences she hadn't anticipated. Week 4, Todd started cutting corners. I108.47. Worker safety protocols got looser. Pay got delayed. The people at the bottom of his organization, the ones who had nothing to do with how he'd treated Catherine, started suffering too. Rosa mentioned it one evening when Catherine picked up the babies. My nephew works construction at the Oasis site. Says they're not getting proper equipment anymore. 10911. Safety inspector got paid off to look the other way. Someone's going to get hurt. Catherine's triumph curdled. I'm sorry. Not your fault. Steele's always been like this. Just getting worse now that he's desperate, though. I wonder what's making him so desperate. Catherine kept her mouth shut, but the guilt noted at her. She called Rodriguez. Yin 10935. The workers, the innocent people caught in this, we're hurting them too. Do you want to stop? Did she? Catherine thought about her babies finally sleeping through the night in a better apartment she could afford, because Rodriguez had helped her access the trust's existing funds. Thought about not having to work 2 jobs anymore. 10956. About actually being able to breathe. Thought about Todd on TV playing hero while the real victims of his empire struggled. No, she said, but can we target it better? Make sure we're only hitting him, not everyone else. I'll see what I can do. Rodriguez helped her craft a letter to the contractors and workers anonymously through multiple legal proxies. 1 Talk 1020. It included documentation of safety violations, unpaid wages, and a hint that if they documented their complaints properly, there might be a settlement fund available. Half of Todd's workforce filed formal complaints within a week. The labor board investigation tied Todd up in legal battles. More delays, more costs, more pressure. 11045. And then Shaw made her mistake. Catherine found out about it from the bartender at Lai's, who heard it from a regular who worked in finance. Shaw had been skimming money from the Oasis development to cover personal expenses, expensive clothes, jewelry, a new car. She'd been careful spreading it across multiple accounts, but desperation made people sloppy, and Catherine had just hired a forensic accountant. 11113. Found it. The accountant reported 3 days later. Helen Shaw has been systematically embezzling from the development fund for 8 months, approximately $400,000. All traceable. Can we prove it? Catherine asked. Yes, with time. But if you want to use this as leverage, there's a faster way. Leak it to the investors. Let them do the investigation. 1 and 11:38. Catherine thought about Shaw on the phone, calling her, nobody, desperate, grasping. Do it. The investors found out about the embezzlement on a Friday. By Monday, Shaw was frozen out of the development meetings. By Wednesday, her family had pulled their funding entirely. And by Friday, Catherine got a call from an unknown number. You did this, Todd's voice the first time she'd heard it since the hospital. 1:12:11. You destroyed Shaw. You're destroying my businesses. This whole thing is you. Catherine's heart hammered, but her voice stayed steady. I don't know what you're talking about. The water rights, the labor complaints, the embezzlement leak. It's all connected. It's all you. Todd's voice was tight with rage. 1:12:37. What do you want, Catherine? Money. Fine. I'll pay you to go away. Name your price. I don't want your money. Then what? What the hell do you want? Catherine looked at her babies playing in their new, safer apartment. Thought about the hospital room, the divorce papers. 3 months of humiliation. I want you to understand what it feels like to lose everything, to be thrown away like garbage, to watch someone else take everything you built. Beat 1:13:11. You're insane. I gave you a clean break. You gave me 41 trash bags and 4 babies. You gave me debt and humiliation, and your head of security taking pity on me. That wasn't a clean break, Todd. That was destruction. You weren't right for that life. Shaw understood. Shaw was stealing from you, and you were too busy playing king to notice. 1:13:41. Catherine's voice hardened. How does it feel knowing you replaced me with someone worse? This conversation is over. My lawyers will be in touch. My lawyers are better. Todd hung up. Catherine sat in silence, adrenaline making her hands shake. He knew. He finally knew. And that meant the next phase would be even more dangerous. 1:14:09. But she was ready. Rodriguez called an hour later. Todd's legal team just filed an emergency injunction to stop the water rights enforcement. They're claiming undue hardship, economic terrorism, whole list of accusations. Will it work? Not if we show up to court with evidence of his business practices, the embezzlement, and the labor violations. 1:14:37. We're not shutting off water out of spite. We're enforcing legitimate property rights against someone who's been stealing resources while abusing workers. Rodriguez paused. But Catherine, this is where it gets real. Court date is in 2 weeks. Todd will be there. Shaw will be there. This is your chance to face them publicly and win, or to back out while you still can. 1:15:04. Catherine thought about her babies, about the future she was building, about the woman she'd been naive, trusting, thinking love could fix anything. And the woman she'd become, harder, smarter, and absolutely done being discarded. Set the court date, she said. Let's finish this. Beat 1:15:28. The invitation arrived on heavy cardstock delivered by courier to Catherine's apartment on a Tuesday morning. Cream-colored paper, embossed lettering, the kind of expensive stationery that screamed money and power. Mr. Todd Steele requests the pleasure of your company for a private negotiation regarding water rights and property usage. Thursday, 2 p.m., 1:15:51. The Crown Jewel Casino Executive Suite. Catherine held it up to the light, looking for hidden threats in the elegant script. Rodriguez had warned her this was coming, the last-ditch attempt to settle before court, to keep everything private, to make the problem go away quietly. She called him immediately. I got the invitation. 1:16:14. Don't go. Rodriguez's voice was sharp. It's a trap. He wants you on his territory without witnesses, where he has control. What if I want to go? Catherine, I want to see his face. I want him to look at me and realize he underestimated me, that I'm not the woman he threw away anymore. Catherine stared at the invitation, and I want to watch him squirm when he realizes I'm not backing down. 1:16:45. Rodriguez was quiet for a long moment. If you insist on going, I'm coming with you. And we're recording everything. New Mexico is a one-party consent state. You can legally record conversations you're part of. We document every word, every threat, every offer. Understood. Understood. And Catherine, don't agree to anything, not even if it sounds good. 1:17:09. This is reconnaissance, not negotiation. Thursday arrived with the kind of oppressive heat that made the desert shimmer. Catherine dressed carefully, a simple black dress, professional, but not trying too hard. She'd lost weight over the past months, but she'd gained something else, a hardness in her eyes that hadn't been there before. 1:17:31. She looked at herself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. Good. She didn't want to be that old Catherine anyway. Rodriguez picked her up at 1:30. He brought an associate, a young lawyer named Patricia, who specialized in recording equipment. They set Catherine up with a device that looked like a simple pendant, but captured audio from 10 ft away. 1:17:55. Remember, Rodriguez said, as they pulled up to the crown jewel. You're in control here. He invited you because he's desperate. That's your power. The casino looked different in daylight, less glamorous, more obviously worn. Catherine noticed things she'd missed before. Paint peeling near the windows. Landscaping that looked dried out and struggling. 1:18:21. The water problems were visible even from outside. Marcus met them at the entrance. He looked uncomfortable. Wouldn't quite meet Catherine's eyes. Miss Woodard, Mr. Rodriguez, Mr. Steele is waiting in the executive suite. He gestured toward the elevators. This way. They rode up in silence. Catherine watched the floor numbers climb. 5, 10, 15. Chi 1, 1846. The executive suite was on the 20th floor, the highest point in Roswell Todd's kingdom, looking down on everything he thought he controlled. The doors opened directly into a reception area. Leather furniture, expensive art, floor-to-ceiling windows with views of the desert. And there, standing with his back to them, looking out at his city, Todd Steele. E1, 1912. He'd lost weight too, Catherine noticed. His suit hung slightly loose. His shoulders were tense. When he turned around, she saw dark circles under his eyes, new lines in his face. Good. She didn't want to be that old Catherine anyway. Catherine. He said her name like it tasted bitter. Then his eyes flicked to Rodriguez. I said private negotiation, and I said my lawyers come with me. This is Rodriguez. 1:19:40. You've spoken to him on the phone. Catherine walked further into the room, claiming space. Where's Shaw? I thought she'd want to be here for this. Something flickered in Todd's expression. Shaw is no longer involved in my business operations. You mean you fired her after I exposed her embezzlement? I smiled. How pragmatic. 1:20:04. You destroyed her reputation. Her family won't speak to her. She lost everything. Todd's voice was tight. Are you proud of that? I'm proud I exposed a thief. What you chose to do about it isn't my responsibility. Catherine sat in one of the leather chairs, crossing her legs, making it clear she wasn't intimidated. 1:20:25. You wanted to talk. Talk. Todd moved to the bar, poured himself a drink, didn't offer anyone else one. This has gone far enough. The water rights claim, the labor complaints, the public investigations. You've made your point, have I? What point is that? That you're angry. That you feel wronged. Fine. I accept that our divorce wasn't handled ideally. 1:20:53. Ideally? Catherine's voice cut like glass. You handed me divorce papers in a hospital bed while our 4 children slept in bassinets beside me. You changed the locks on my house. You threw my belongings in trash bags. You claimed no financial responsibility for your own babies. That wasn't non-ideal, Todd. That was monstrous. 121:15. I was making a clean break. Shaw convinced me it was necessary. Shaw convinced you I was worthless. And you believed her because it was convenient. Because children are expensive and messy and bad for your image as the untouchable Mafia king. But here's what Shaw didn't know. And you forgot. 121:36. Miguel Castillo saw exactly what you are, and he left me the weapon to destroy you. Todd's jaw tightened. The barren lands. Miguel's last joke. Giving you worthless dessert so you'd think you had power. Worthless. That worthless desert sits on top of the aquifer that feeds your entire operation. Every drop of water running through this casino, your hotels, your developments, it's all mine. 1:22:06. Miguel knew exactly what he was doing. He was giving me your throat. Miguel was a dying old man with delusions of revenge. Miguel was smarter than you'll ever be. He played the long game, built in a fail-safe for when someone inevitably betrayed him. Catherine stood walking to the windows. He just never expected that fail-safe would be me. Todd drained his drink. 1:22:33. What do you want? Really, because this isn't about water rights. This is about punishing me for leaving you. You didn't leave me, Todd. You discarded me. There's a difference. Catherine turned back to him. Leaving implies I had value and you chose to walk away. Discarding means you decided I was garbage. 1:22:55. That our children were garbage. That 4 tiny humans you helped create weren't worth even looking at. I wasn't ready to be a father. Then you shouldn't have gotten me pregnant 4 times in one pregnancy. Catherine's voice was shaking now, rage breaking through the careful control. Do you know what it's like carrying quadruplets for 8 and 1 or 2 months? The pain, the fear, the risk. 1:23:23. I almost died, Todd, twice during that delivery. And you couldn't even stay to see if I'd survive. The doctor said you'd be fine. The doctor said I had a 60% chance. 60%. And you left anyway because Shaw was waiting. Catherine blinked back tears. I loved you. I believed in you. I nursed you back to health when you were nobody. 1:23:50. I stood by you through everything. And the second it was inconvenient, you threw me away. Todd was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was softer. I know I handled it badly. I'm sorry. Sorry. Catherine laughed hollow. You're sorry. Do you know what sorry would look like, Todd? It would look like child support, like calling to check on your children, like showing even the smallest interest in whether they're alive or dead. 1:24:21. But you haven't done any of that. So, no, you're not sorry. You're desperate. I'm trying to make this right. You're trying to make this go away. Different thing. Catherine pulled out her phone, showed him a photo of the quadruplets. These are your daughters, Bella, Maya, Hope, and Grace. They're 5 months old now. 1:24:44. They smile. They laugh. They're starting to roll over and reach for things. They're whole perfect people who will grow up knowing their father wanted nothing to do with them. Todd looked at the photo. Something crossed his face. Regret, maybe, or just discomfort at being confronted with consequences. I'll set up trust funds, he said finally, for all of them. 1:25:09. College, medical expenses, whatever they need. But you have to drop the water rights case. You're destroying my business, Catherine. I'm losing millions. Good. This isn't just about me. I have employees, workers who depend on those businesses. You shut me down, they lose jobs. Their families suffer. Is that what you want? Catherine had been waiting for this. 1:25:35. The moral manipulation making her the villain for his failures. I've already set up an assistance fund for your displaced workers. Rodriguez helped me establish it last month. Anyone who loses their job because of your mismanagement can apply for help while they find new employment because, unlike you, I actually care about the collateral damage. She smiled. File 126 the sign. So, no, Todd, you don't get to use your workers as human shields. This is about you and me and the fact that you're finally facing consequences. Todd's expression hardened. You think you've won? You think having some land and a smart lawyer makes you untouchable, but you don't understand how this world works. 126:23. The people I do business with, they don't appreciate disruption. They don't like loose ends. And right now, you're a very loose end. Is that a threat? It's a warning. Back off before someone decides to cut that end. Rodriguez stood up immediately. And there it is. Threats of violence recorded for the court. Thank you, Mr. Steele. 126:49. You just gave us everything we need. Todd's eyes widened as he realized what he had said. That wasn't, I didn't mean you meant exactly what you said. Catherine stood. You meant that if I don't cooperate, you'll have me killed. Just like you probably had Miguel killed, just like you've killed anyone who got in your way. Miguel died of a heart attack in his sleep. 127:14. How convenient. No autopsy, no investigation, just the old crime boss dying peacefully, leaving his throne to you. But Miguel had the last laugh, didn't he? Because he left me the bomb, and I just pulled the pin. Catherine, wait. We're done here. See you in court, Todd. Try not to threaten me again on recording. It's a bad look. 127:41. She walked out, Rodriguez and Patricia following. Marcus was in the hallway, still looking uncomfortable. Catherine paused. Marcus, you have daughters, right? He nodded, wary. Get them away from him. Whatever he's planning, whatever he's about to do, it's not going to end well. And I'd hate for your girls to lose their father because he chose the wrong side. 128:07. Handed him a card. Rodriguez's office. If you need witness protection or want to talk about what you've seen working for Todd, call him. The offer expires in 72 hours. Marcus stared at the card. Why are you telling me this? Because you gave me $5,000 when you didn't have to. Because you have a conscience, even if you've been burying it to survive. 128:32. And because when this all comes crashing down, I want to make sure the people who were decent have a way out. Catherine met his eyes. Think about it. They left him standing in the hallway, card in hand, looking torn. In the car, Rodriguez was grinning. That went better than I expected. We got him threatening you on tape. That changes everything. 128:58. Will it be enough for court? Combined with everything else? Absolutely. The embezzlement, the labor violations, the illegal water usage, and now, threats of violence. Todd Steele's empire is about to become a case study in how not to run a criminal organization. Catherine looked out the window at Roswell passing by. 129:22. The desert heat made everything waver. She thought about Todd's face when she'd shown him photos of his daughters. The flash of something, not quite regret, but acknowledgement. Maybe that they existed, that they were real. Do you think he'll actually try something? She asked quietly. The threat? Was it real? Rodriguez's smile faded. Probably. He 129:48. Desperate men do desperate things. I'm assigning security to your apartment, and I want you to vary your routine. Different times to work, different routes home. Don't go anywhere alone. Fear tried to claw its way up Catherine's throat, but she pushed it down. She'd been afraid for 5 months now, afraid of being alone, of failing her children, of not surviving. 1:30:16. She was tired of being afraid. Let him try, she said. I'm done running. The syndicate meeting was held in a place Catherine had heard about but never seen. The Oasis room buried beneath one of Todd's casinos. Not the crown jewel. That would be too obvious. This was an older property, the kind with secrets in the foundations and blood in the floorboards. 13042. Catherine wasn't supposed to be here. Women didn't attend syndicate meetings unless they were entertainment or casualties. But Rodriguez had pulled strings with some of Miguel's old allies, the ones who remembered the old boss's final wishes. They'd agreed to let Catherine present her case directly to the families, bypassing Todd's ability to control the narrative. 13106. This is unprecedented, Rodriguez had warned her. The families don't like change, they don't like outsiders, and they especially don't like being told their golden boy has been lying to them. Good thing I'm not here to be liked. Now Catherine stood in an elevator with Rodriguez, descending into the earth. The elevator had no buttons above ground level, only numbers going down. 13132, Suble 1, 2, 3. They stopped at 5. The doors opened onto a corridor lit by sconces that cast everything in gold and shadow. At the end, double doors. 2 men in expensive suits flanked them. Security that made Marcus look soft. Ms. Woodard. One of them opened the door without checking anything. 13157. They'd been expecting her. The families are waiting. The Oasis room was exactly what it sounded like, a pocket of impossible luxury buried in the desert. Water features lined the walls. Lush plants grew from strategic planters. And in the center sat a massive conference table made of polished obsidian. Around it sat 7 people, each representing a different faction of the New Mexico criminal underworld. 13226. And at the head of the table, in what had been Miguel's chair, sat Todd Steele. He looked up when Catherine entered, and for just a second, she saw a genuine shock. He hadn't known she'd been invited. Whoever had arranged this had kept it secret, even from the king. "What is she doing here?" Todd demanded. 13248. Miss Woodard has been granted permission to address the families. The speaker was an older woman at Todd's right, Elena Vargas, if Catherine remembered correctly. Miguel's cousin, the one who controlled the routes from Mexico. She has information relevant to our collective interests. This is a private meeting. She has no business. She has every business. 13310. A man across from Elena spoke now. Japanese, maybe 60, wearing a suit that probably cost more than Catherine's car. Miguel's final requests carry weight, even posthumously. Especially posthumously. Todd's jaw tightened. Fine. Say what you need to say and leave. Catherine walked to the table. Didn't sit. Standing made her taller, more imposing. 13336. She dressed for this. A tailored suit in midnight blue, her hair pulled back severely, makeup minimal. She looked nothing like the woman in the hospital bed, nothing like the desperate mother in the motel. She looked dangerous. "Thank you for seeing me." Catherine's voice was steady. "I'll be brief. 6 months ago, Todd Steele divorced me under circumstances I won't detail here. 13401. They're not relevant to you. What is relevant is that in doing so, he overlooked a property I inherited from Miguel Castillo, 15,000 acres of barren land. We know about the barren lands. Miguel's joke gift to you. Useless dirt. That's what everyone thought. That's what Todd thought, which is why he didn't bother to hide what he was doing. 13425. Catherine nodded to Rodriguez, who placed folders in front of each family head. For the past 7 years, Todd's operations have been drawing water from an aquifer beneath my property without authorization, without compensation, without even checking who owned it. Todd stood up. "This is insane. The water rights are mine." 13449. Catherine's voice cut through his. "Geological surveys, legal documents, property records. It's all in the folders. Every gallon Todd used has been theft. Approximately $8 million worth." Silence around the table. Then Elena opened her folder, started reading. The others followed. This can't be right, Todd said, but his voice wavered. 135:15. The city permits were fraudulent, Rodriguez said, speaking for the first time. The city believed they had rights to the aquifer based on the inconclusive 1987 survey. They didn't, and Mr. Steele never bothered to verify. He just assumed the Japanese man. Catherine learned later his name was Kenji Stowe. Looked up from his folder. 135:37. You've been using stolen resources to fuel your expansion, the new resort, the hotels, everything. It wasn't stolen. It was unauthorized usage of someone else's property. That's the definition of stealing, Mr. Steele. Elena's voice was cold. How much of our investment money has been built on theft? None of it. 135:59. The businesses are legitimate, built with water you didn't have rights to, water you're now being sued for, water that could be shut off at any moment. Could you shut it off right now? Elena asked. Yes, Catherine said simply. I've been doing it gradually for 6 weeks. That's why his businesses have been struggling. 136:20. Inconsistent pressure, brown water, construction delays. I've been squeezing him slowly to see how long it took him to figure it out. You've been sabotaging my operations. Todd's face was flushed now. That's enforcing my property rights. I'm allowed to control who uses my water, and I've decided Todd doesn't get to anymore. 136:44. Catherine turned to the families. But that's not why I'm here. I didn't come to tell you about water rights. I came to tell you about Helen Shaw. Todd went pale. Shaw? Elena asked, confused. Your former associate? What about her? She was embezzling from the Oasis development. $400,000 over 8 months. Todd either knew and didn't care or didn't know and was too incompetent to notice. 137:12. Catherine pulled out another set of documents. The forensic accounting is in here. Detailed transactions, false receipts, everything. Your investment money siphoned for designer clothes and luxury cars. The room exploded, multiple voices talking over each other, some angry, some calculating. Todd stood frozen at the head of the table watching his empire crack in real time. 137:38. I didn't know about the embezzlement, he said desperately. Shaw handled the books. I trusted. You trusted wrong again. Kenji Sato said, his voice quiet but deadly. First you build on stolen water, then you let your partner steal from us. What other poor decisions have you made, Mr. Steele? Nothing. This is Catherine's trying to destroy me. 138:02. She's manipulating you. Is the water documentation false? Elena asked. No, but is the embezzlement documentation false? No, but then she's not manipulating anything. She's revealing your incompetence. Elena stood. Miguel warned us this might happen. He said you were too hungry, too reckless. We didn't listen because you were making money. 138:25. But a kingdom built on theft and lies doesn't stand. Miguel was losing his edge. He was smart enough to leave insurance. Elena gestured to Catherine. This insurance, a woman you underestimated so completely, you threw her away without checking what she had. And now she owns you. Catherine felt the moment shift, the room's energy changing from Todd's territory to neutral ground, maybe even to her advantage. 138:55. I don't want to own him, Catherine said clearly. I want justice. Todd Steele abandoned me and our 4 children. He took everything from me, tried to crush me, and expected me to disappear quietly. I won't. But more than that, he's been playing you all for fools, using your money to build on stolen resources, letting his girlfriend rob you, making decisions that put all of you at risk. 139:22. What do you want? Another family had asked. Woman may be 40, covered in expensive jewelry. Why come to us instead of just taking him to court? Because court is slow, public, messy. It hurts everyone, including innocent workers and your investments. Catherine met the woman's eyes. I'm offering you a better way. Let me buy Todd's debt. 1:39:47. Silence? Complete, suffocating silence. Then Todd laughed. You buy my debt? With what money? With Miguel's money. The trust he left me wasn't just land, it was accounts, holdings, investments. He left me everything he'd pulled out before you forced him into retirement. Catherine smiled. He was preparing for this exact scenario, and I'm ready to execute it. 1:40:12. Elena was studying her with new respect. You want to buy his debt? Take over his territory? I want to own his debt and dismantle his kingdom piece by piece. Sell the casinos to operators who actually care about their workers. Shut down the operations that hurt people, keep the ones that are legitimate, and make sure Todd Steele ends up exactly where he left me with nothing. Beach 1:40:39. This is insane, Todd said. But his voice was weak now. You can't just... The families won't. The families will do what's profitable and smart. Elena looked around the table. Show of hands. Who wants to keep Todd Steele in charge knowing what we now know? No hands went up. Who wants to negotiate with Ms. Woodard about debt transfers and operational control? 1:41:04. Every hand went up except Todd's. Then we have consensus. Mr. Steele, you're hereby removed from leadership. Ms. Woodard will need to review exact terms, but in principle, we accept your proposal. Todd stared around the table, betrayal flickering across his face. You can't do this. I built this empire. You are nothing without me. 1:41:27. We're business people, Kenji said flatly. And you're bad business. Miss Woodard is offering to clean up your mess and protect our investments. That's good business. Miguel set this up. He planned this whole thing to destroy me. Miguel planned for someone to have a fail-safe if you became a liability. You made yourself the liability. 1:41:52. Don't blame a dead man for your failures. Elena gestured to security. Escort Mr. Steele out. His access to all properties is revoked immediately. You can't just throw me out. Watch us. Security moved in. Todd tried to resist, but they were professionals. Within seconds, he was being lifted from his chair, being walked toward the doors. 1:42:17. He looked back at Catherine one last time. This isn't over. You think you've won, but you don't understand what you've just walked into. These people will eat you alive. Then I'll bite back harder. Catherine's voice was steel. Goodbye, Todd. Say hi to the streets for me. I heard they're really hot this time of year. 1:42:40. The doors closed behind him, and just like that, the Mafia king was deposed. Catherine stood at the head of the table in Miguel's chair in the kingdom Todd had stolen. Elena was smiling. You're either very brave or very stupid. Maybe both. Definitely both, Catherine agreed. But I'm also right and I'm ready to work. Then let's talk numbers. 1:43:06. They talked for 3 hours. By the end, Catherine owned 70% of Todd's former empire. The families retained minority shares to protect their investments, but operational control was hers. She had lawyers, accountants, security, everything she needed to actually run the territories. Miguel had left her the tools to claim. He won 43:31. When she finally emerged from the Oasis room, it was dark outside. Rodriguez was waiting in the corridor. Well, he asked, I'm the new Queen of Roswell. Catherine laughed, slightly hysterical. What the hell did I just do? You won. Rodriguez gripped her shoulder. You actually won. I destroyed him. Yes, you did. 1:43:54. Exactly like you said you would. Rodriguez studied her face, having second thoughts. Catherine thought about Todd being escorted out, about the look on his face. Shock, betrayal, fear, about how it felt to be thrown away as nothing. No, she said finally. No second thoughts. He made his choices. Now he lives with them. Her phone buzzed. A text from Rosa. 1:44:20. Babies are asleep. Take your time. And congratulations. Heard the news already. This town talks fast. Catherine smiled. Let's go home. I need to see my kids. The new queen needs her sleep. Rodriguez agreed. They walked out of the casino together. Catherine's heels clicking on marble floors that were now technically hers. 1:44:45. Outside, the Roswell night was cool and clear. Stars everywhere. The way they used to be before Catherine's life became complicated. Somewhere in this city, Todd Steele was learning what it meant to have nothing. And Catherine was finally learning what it meant to have everything. Catherine found Todd 3 weeks later purely by accident. 1:45:08. She was driving past the construction site that used to be the Oasis development, now shut down, pending restructuring and worker safety reviews. And there, sitting on the curb outside the chain-link fence, was a figure in dirty clothes that she almost didn't recognize. Almost. She pulled over, sat in her car for a long moment, deciding. 1:45:30. Then she got out. Todd looked up as she approached. His expensive suit was gone, replaced by jeans and a t-shirt that had seen better days. His face was sunburned, stubbled. He'd lost even more weight. He looked small. Come to gloat? His voice was. No. Catherine stayed a few feet away. I'm checking on the site, making sure the construction teams have what they need. 1:45:57. Didn't expect to see you here. Todd laughed bitter. Where else would I be? I've got nothing. No house. You bought it. No car. Repossessed. No money. Frozen accounts. Shaw left me the day after the syndicate meeting. Didn't even pretend to care. Just gone. Where are you staying? Wherever. Shelter sometimes. The desert when it's not too hot. 1:46:23. He looked up at her. I know what you're thinking. That I deserve this. That this is poetic justice. I'm thinking you look like you need water. Catherine pulled a bottle from her car, handed it to him. Todd stared at it like it might be poisoned. Then he took it, drank half in one go. Why are you being nice to me? He asked. I'm not being nice. 1:46:45. I'm being human. There's a difference. Catherine sat down on the curb a few feet away. You were wrong about what I wanted, Todd. I didn't want to destroy you for revenge. I wanted you to understand what you'd done, to feel what I felt. Mission accomplished. Todd's voice was hollow. I lost everything. You won. 1:47:08. Feel better? Not really. Catherine looked at the sunset painting the desert gold. It turns out making someone else hurt doesn't heal your own pain. It just makes two people hurt. Then why did you do it? Because someone had to stop you. You were hurting people. Todd. Workers. Families. Anyone who got in your way. Shaw was just one more symptom of how far you'd fallen. 1:47:34. Catherine turned to him. Miguel knew that's why he left me the tools. Not to destroy you, but to stop you from destroying everything. Todd was quiet for a long time. Then, do you ever regret it marrying me? Catherine thought about the question. Really thought about it. I regret not seeing who you really were. I regret believing I could fix you. 1:47:59. But I don't regret the kids. They're perfect. They're everything good that came from something bad. Do they? Todd's voice cracked. Do they ask about me? They're 5 months old. They don't ask about anything except food and clean diapers. Catherine softened slightly. But yes, Todd, they exist, and they're going to grow up and ask about their father. 1:48:22. And I don't know what to tell them. Tell them I was and who didn't deserve them. I'll tell them their father made mistakes, big ones, but that people are more than their worst moments. Catherine stood up. There's a shelter 3 blocks from here, St. Michael's. They have a rehabilitation program, job training, housing assistance. 14843. If you're serious about starting over, go there. Tell them Catherine Woodard sent you. Todd looked up at her. Why? After everything I did to you, why would you help me? Because my daughters are going to ask me someday what kind of person their mother is. And I want to be able to say I'm someone who helps people even when they don't deserve it, even when they hurt me. 14906. Catherine pulled out an envelope. This is $5,000, the exact amount Marcus gave me when you threw me out. Consider it returned. She set it on the curb next to him. Todd stared at it, then at her. I'm sorry for all of it. For not seeing what I had until it was gone. For throwing you away like you didn't matter. 14929. For I know, Catherine cut him off. But sorry doesn't fix anything, Todd. Only actions do. So take that money, go to the shelter, get your life together, and maybe someday you can meet your daughters. If you've actually changed, you'd let me see them. I'd let them decide if they want to see you when they're old enough to understand. That's years away. 14953. You've got a lot of work to do before then. She got in the car. The back seat was full. 4 car seats, 4 sleeping babies. They'd just been to the pediatrician. All healthy, all growing strong. They'd never know their father tried to pretend they didn't exist. Catherine would make sure of that. 15013. As she pulled away, she saw Todd in her rear-view mirror. He was standing now, holding the envelope, watching her drive away. For just a second, she thought she saw something in his posture. Not quite redemption, but maybe the beginning of understanding. Maybe. Catherine drove through Roswell, taking the scenic route, past the Crown Jewel Casino, now under new management and actually paying workers fair wages. 15040. Past the construction site where the Oasis was being rebuilt with proper safety protocols. Past the hotel where she'd stayed when she had nothing, now offering subsidized housing for women in crisis. Miguel's empire had been built on violence and greed, and Todd only made it worse. But Catherine was trying to build something different, something that used the same resources but for better purposes. 15107. It was slow work, hard work, and some of the families thought she was too soft. But her territories were profitable. Workers were happy. Violence was down. And that spoke louder than skepticism. Her phone rang. Rosa. Hey, mija. The babies are awake and asking for you. Well, crying for you. Same thing. Catherine smiled. I'm 5 minutes away. Drive safe. 15131. Oh, and that Marcus guy called, says he's ready to testify about Todd's old operations. Wants witness protection for his family. Tell him Rodriguez will call him tomorrow. We'll take care of it. She hung up and pulled into the parking lot of her new building. Not a mansion. She didn't need that. Just a nice apartment complex she'd bought and renovated, turning half the units into affordable housing for single parents. 15156. She lived in the penthouse, but it was modest, comfortable, safe. Rosa met her at the door. Babies already in her arms. They were perfect today. Well, Bella threw up on me twice, otherwise perfect. Catherine took Bella, breathing in that baby smell. Did you apologize for throwing up on Rosa, Bella? The baby gurgled, unrepentant. 15219. She's her mother's daughter, Rosa said, grinning. Fierce and uncompromising. Catherine carried her babies inside one by one, fed them, played with them, sang to them. At bedtime, she read them a story, not from a book, but one she made up, about a queen who started with nothing and built a kingdom not through violence, but through justice. 15241. When they were finally asleep, Catherine stood on her balcony, looking out at the city. Her city now in a weird, terrifying, exhilarating way. The desert stretched out beyond the lights, dark and vast and full of possibility. Her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. Thank you for the shelter recommendation. 15302. Starting the program tomorrow. I'll do better. T. Catherine stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back. Good. Your daughters deserve a better father. You have a lot of time to become that person. Don't waste it. She didn't wait for a response, just put the phone down and went back inside. EA1, 5322. Tomorrow she had meetings about expanding the Worker Assistance Fund, about investigating 2 more embezzlement cases in properties she'd inherited, about actually running an empire that she never wanted but now couldn't abandon. It was terrifying work, dangerous work, but it was her work, and she was good at it. Inside, one of the babies started crying. 153 on 44. Catherine went to the nursery, picked up Hope, the smallest one, the one doctors had worried about. She was healthy now, thriving. All 4 of them were. It's okay, Mija. Mama's got you. Mama's always got you. Hope settled, tiny fist wrapping around Catherine's finger. Outside, Roswell slept under stars that had watched crime families rise and fall for generations. 15411. Inside, a woman who started with nothing but trash bags and determination held her child and planned for a future that looked nothing like her past. The Mafia king was gone. Long lived the queen. Kao chuyen kwa Catherine chote, rang bikich lonhat kwa moten goi punu khong phaila, bifan boy. Ma la bi sem hu tu kotavut, bok hi khong kon gia trisudung. Nhung kung chin tu nui tan kung jo, suk mandat su juok sin ra. Catherine kong jung day, bang su thu han mukwang, ma bang tri tue. Sukien han va ithok ro rang, vegia tri kua banthan. Ko hiu rang tra thu hong phai, la fa hui joy fuang trong, kon gian du. Ma la gian lai, kuyen kiem sawat kuok joy min. Buk ketung cha jap min, pai joy dien voi hau quadochin ho taura. Bai hok sao sak nhat kwa kau chuyen la. Kimot ngoi punuthoi sin juak yo thuong, va bat jau tu bao ve min. Kong kuyen luk nao ko the sem thuong ko nua. Sukman benvung kong jen tu vieslam, ngoi kach jau nhu tatung jau. Ma jen tu viets bien, ton thuong tan, nen mong jesai, nen mot kuok joy, ma kong ai, ko kwen tuok joat.